We on? Yeah.
You guys can hear Philip?
Yes.
All right, we're good. Thanks for attending a panel about fashion moderated by me. It's very generous of you guys. Will, can we start off with some news about H&M today?
Yeah.
Can you explain what H&M did today?
Yeah, so I think this morning we were talking about the future of fashion, and I think we're seeing a really great example of the future of fashion, like literally unfolding right now. There is an enormous queue of people on Regent Street in London, all queuing up for the new H&M collaboration with Balmain, right? And I think if you think about what's happened to Balmain in the last 2 years, it was a kind of stuffy old French fashion house that 70-year-old like grandmas bought into. They hired a 25-year-old fashion director who's obsessed with Instagram. He built for want of a better phrase, a hashtag army around the brand, and has now got young people everywhere interacting with Balmain via Instagram, via Facebook, via Twitter, and now queuing up for what is certainly going to be a sellout collection. All the reports that I've had from friends who are there this morning are that people are elbowing each other, punching each other to get to this stuff, and I think it's a really interesting twist. You know, they haven't launched it through the pages of Vogue. They haven't launched it through the pages of Refinery 29. It's been launched on Instagram. Right?
So if you're a fashion designer, if you're a fashion consumer, a fashion fan, that sounds very exciting. If you're a publisher, that sounds maybe not so great. If people are sort of bypassing you and going directly to fans via platforms like Instagram, Twitter, what's the role for publishers, whether they're an old line publisher like Condé or a new one? Like Refinery 29.
Well, yeah. I think the sort of significance of this event is ultimately that fashion used to be this sort of like tops-down approach to telling the world and telling people what to do and what to wear, and it's really become this sort of much more disintermediated universe where it's really about sort of taking things apart and sort of celebrating the fact that users and the community can sort of participate themselves. I think ultimately it's about storytelling, it's about content, right? And something like the H&M collection creates content in and of itself. In a company like Refinery 29, we work with H&M and have for many years in creating content, right? And essentially sort of lifting out the experience that has existed in sort of banners and pre-roll for a long time, and finding ways to natively and organically tell that story.
So in some cases you're building these campaigns for people like H&M, like Balmain, without Refinery's branding on it.
Not really. No? Very rarely do we do that. For the most part, when we team up with brands like H&M, it's actually Refinery 29 plus H&M. So we really have made it our cause to grow with the biggest brands in the world out there in sort of mission-driven partnerships. So it's really about Refinery 29 and H&M. It's not us creating sort of white label solutions.
Yeah, I think if we're thinking about the future direction that that's going in, clearly it's being more dictated by what the public is looking for and what the fashion audience is looking for on social media than it is about necessarily a really top-down editorial agenda. I think you're exactly right. I think we're very used to, in the Condé Nast world, putting things in the magazine and saying this is what something is. I think we're really having to get used to now listening to an audience and saying, okay, what are people interested in? I think for us, social media has kicked off to such a degree. It's really changed the way we think about everything from the fashion stories that we create in the magazine through to the news pieces that we put on the website. It's a different world, and the fact that something like H&M this morning and Balmain has gone so ballistic all over social media, like that's setting the news agenda, not anything that we're saying.
So right. So if you just said that's setting the news agenda, that they're going directly to the public, they're using other people's platforms. So the next time a designer comes to you, or you go to a designer and say, "We'd like to work with you on your next line," and they say, "Well, we don't really need to use you, right? We can go right to Instagram. We just saw this." What's your pitch to them? How do you say you should work with Condé? How do you say you should work with Refinery? If it looks like they can go direct to the public.
Yeah. So I think there is always a wide audience that you can go to directly via a platform. I think one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we're on those platforms as well, right? We had this conversation about how it's no good just having, for the future of fashion, it's no good just having a website. You've got to have a distributed presence everywhere that people are, whether it's Apple News, whether it's Facebook Instant Articles, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, whatever the latest social network is, whether it's YouTube. You've got to be in all those places and curate an audience that's valuable. And if you're not in those places curating an audience that's valuable, like you're not really adding any value. So I think for us, it's really important to be in each of those spaces and doing something where there is value for H&M, there is value in the audience that we've curated, because the Vogue audience is a particular type of audience.
It's also not one or the other, right? Because I don't think that all of a sudden, because there is so much content created by an army of people who obviously are passionate about the brand and the product, that all of a sudden you don't have a media company anymore. In our case, in the United States, we reach 75% of millennial women. You don't have a partner who still, throughout the year, with cadence, really is the sort of creative outlet that allows us to speak to our consumers on behalf of the brand H&M in really sort of meaningful and thought-through ways throughout the duration of the year.
So Instagram, photography online makes sense. What about video? How do you handle moving images? Everyone says they want to produce video and distribute video. I think making it and getting it out there seems to be a real challenge for every kind of publisher right now.
Yeah, I think that there are certain types of video that the fashion industry has always produced. The very beautiful, fashion film that's not particularly perhaps got a story, but it's very floaty and the camera angles are amazing. And it's wonderful, but it's not necessarily particularly engaging. And one of the things that we've done when we're looking at across our titles, whether it's GQ, Vogue, Wired, is try and put like a cultural filter on video and try and make something that's relevant, right? People don't just want to see the clothes. You want to see the clothes in some kind of setting that makes sense. You want some kind of story. You probably want some sort of talent attached to it. And I think the one thing that the meteoric rise of the kind of YouTube fashion blogger or the YouTube sort of beauty community has told us is that personality is what sells a video. People want to have a direct relationship with somebody on the other side of that camera, and it's all about the engagement that you get with that individual person. So for us, it's been about moving away from really abstract shoots towards interacting with personalities on camera.
2015 has been the year of two things. One is video, the other one is really the distributed ecosystem of media. And so on the first part, video, it used to be that sort of competition was very verticalized. Like you had your magazine brands here, and you had your video and TV brands over here. But this is the year of sort of full-on collision. So video for us has grown from 5% of revenue last year to expected 45% of revenue. So video is actually driving our business now in really meaningful ways, and we're really sort of investing in two ends of the spectrum in video. One is for short-form distribution, right, and that's everything from your Facebooks, which obviously, Facebook is the driver of video consumption now, to Snapchat and so on, and then longer-form creation of content that ultimately is sort of geared for, for distribution on video-on-demand platforms, OTT platforms, even possibly television. So video is a huge growing part of our business. And ultimately, sort of where you see all of your consumers moving with 80, 90% of your users on mobile, people are tuning into video first.
Is it that consumers want to actually see this stuff, or is it that advertisers desperately want to get consumers to see this stuff?
Consumers want to see this stuff. I mean,
I think absolutely both.
I think it's definitely both, but consumers are driving it, right? I mean, even so we launched on Snapchat Discover recently, which is obviously a huge deal. It's sort of in some respects, the future of television with regards to like channel surfing, and what you see on there is video. Video is the sort of like dominant medium that is driving the experience.
Phil, can you talk about Snapchat a little bit? You guys just launched on Discover, like you said. Snapchat Discover's been around now for probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
What did you learn watching other publishers try to handle Discover, and how is that affecting your launch?
So first of all, 100 million users on the platform. The numbers in terms of daily consumption rival even your strongest days in some specific channels. So inordinate consumption, your consumer base is there. I think what we've learned is that everybody is sort of still trying to figure it out, both in terms of content and content narration and what actually makes sense on the platform, video and not video. Are you shooting for Snapchat specifically, right? So that's for our team something that is really sort of...
So you have to create a team that builds only for Snapchat?
Only for Snapchat, and actually when you shoot a video now, you have a team of people that are shooting for long-form distribution, but simultaneously you have a small team on set that are shooting for Snapchat, right?
Because you want to shoot vertically. Do you send 2 camera crews out to shoot something? Or?
You have 2 camera crews that are shooting something. And so those are the nuances of creating for Snapchat. Then there is, selling on Snapchat, sort of working with your partners to create campaigns. And I think what you see there is it's an entirely new conversation, because people need to have trust in the relationship between us, media company, and brand, because you're producing stuff that gets produced like that. There isn't a lot of
Yeah.
sign-off. There isn't a lot of control.
And that's a really interesting tension, because I think we're really used to, in the fashion industry, the history is that everything is perfect. Everything before it gets out the door, before it gets shot, before it gets put on the runway, it's absolutely styled to perfection. It looks perfect. Everything is creatively directed to within an inch of its life. We're entering a world now where experimentation is everything. We don't know exactly how to sell something on Snapchat. We don't know exactly how to sell something on social media. And so we're like publishers, fashion houses, whoever it is, we're all working out as we go along.
Right.
It's a really different mindset from everything has to be perfect before it goes. Now we're kind of building it in public as we go. And I think for the fashion industry as a whole, that's a completely different twist to have to get their head around.
Up until recently, if you're a modern digital publisher, well, we A/B test everything. We've got a ton of data.
Yeah.
We're figuring out how to make this stuff very precise. Now you're moving to a distributed world where, in some cases, I believe with Snapchat, you get very little data about how stuff performs. It's almost like working in a print magazine, right? You really don't know why they're looking at it. How do you approach something where you're experimenting, but you can't really see the results of the experiment? It's sort of up to the platform to tell you if you're working or not.
Well, I mean, for us, we grew up establishing Refinery 29 in a medium fashion and style that traditionally wasn't sort of, at the vanguard of building, platforms that allowed themselves to sort of rigorously test content. So we pride ourselves on the sort of, the testing of images, of day parting, of headlines, and everything that we do with content. Snapchat is a little different because the data that you get comes a little later.
What data do you get? What do they tell you about how stuff works?
The data that you see is sort of, it's very top line. It's top line in terms of like the program. So if you produce 14 specific segments per day, you see the engagement and you see the click-through rate
So you'll
on
know
those.
that thing X got this many more views than thing Y.
Exactly. So it's then for yourself, up to you to sort of drive conclusions from that. Are people more into beauty? Are they into fashion? Are they, are they leaning into, video quizzes or whatever it might be?
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it's faintly,
to guess.
It's faintly terrifying to guess. I mean, as you say, we've all moved now into an industry where we're all looking at quantitative data. We're all looking at stats. You build umpteen Google Analytics events to track every single thing that people are doing on your pages, and you kind of get used to building media in that way. And as you go across more and more distributed platforms, I mean, Apple is the same, right? As you go across more and more distributed platforms, you get less and less granular data that you have less and less control over. And you suddenly realize you've got to kind of make like editorial or creative decisions without that data to back you up, which ironically is kind of the stuff that we were kind of doing like 10 years ago. So it feels a bit like going back in time. It's something actually our editors like feel incredibly comfortable with, which is sort of the irony.
Except the difference, right, is there actually is data out there. You're just not getting it.
Yeah, we're just not getting it.
That's very scary. So earlier this fall, the folks from Condé Nast in the U.S. sent me a package. It weighed several pounds. It was bound. it was the September issue of Vogue.
Yeah.
Why is the print edition of Vogue full of ads in 2015, and what does that tell you about what you guys are doing?
I think it tells you that print as a sector might be shrinking, but that there's a flight to quality that people are still obsessed by, right? If the overall print market goes down, the winners in that market will be the absolute top flight titles. I mean, in the US, in the UK September Vogue this year was the biggest ever September Vogue, more pages of advertising than we've ever had before. And a lot of that is a consequence of other titles aren't doing so well, and when other titles aren't doing so well on the circulation front, the winners are the people who are at the top. The circulation of British Vogue has been kind of like flat for about the last 5 years, and whilst it's not drastically going through the roof, right, British Vogue
flat
in print,
is the new up.
Yeah, is not a growth business, but it's also not going anywhere, and it's like you're never going to get, you've kind of hit the bottom, I think.
So what is the thing that a print edition is delivering to advertisers and readers that they're not getting online?
Luxury. It's luxury. It's the feeling of the thing in your hand, right? There is. I had an advertiser say to me last week that it's possible that the double page spread is the greatest advertising medium ever invented.
Right. Every 6 months, someone realizes that people like watching, people like looking
people
at the
like
ads
watching
on
TV,
Vogue.
right?
And people like looking at the ads on Vogue, and they say, "Oh, we should do some of that." Philippe, are you guys going to do a print edition?
No, we're not going to sell a magazine. We actually do a fair amount of print work with our partners. So H&M and Refiner 29, we distribute those print publications in store. We actually did the same thing with Primark, which we launched in the US. But to the point about Vogue, Vogue is sort of like the juggernaut. It's the thing that is like the biggest asset for Condé. And Condé Nast produced some amazing products, right? New Yorker to me is still the greatest magazine of all times. But at the same time, a company like Condé has had arguably a difficult time sort of partaking in the digital transformation, right? Of ultimately doing two things: A, really scaling audience in that medium, allowing your brand to really expand to all the distribution channels, and then two, cracking the nut on what digital monetization looks like at scale. And that's where just the mediums of traditional print or banner ads just don't jive with how you sort of sell at scale. Brands don't, in the digital ecosystem, don't really want to just sell through banner ads.
So it sounds like you're saying that the giant print edition of Vogue, which people apparently want to read, buy, and buy ads in, is an anachronism, and it's almost like going to a museum, and it's a fabulous thing, but it's not the future.
No, I think you just contradicted yourself, right? Because you just said that it's more relevant today than it's ever been. So by definition, it can't really be an anachronism.
I was trying to paraphrase Philippe here.
That's okay.
But there's a gap here, right? Because
there's
clearly a demand for this print thing. You're saying, well, we're going to skip ahead to the future.
I think that's what you're seeing in television as well, right? You're still seeing businesses that are still making a lot of money in traditional mediums, and the same thing is true for TV. But on the other hand, on the digital side, you see the difficulty of those brands making that transition because there's still so much money tied in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it turns out the future of fashion, the future of media is channel conflict, just like it is in every other part of media, right? You have an existing way of distributing, selling content that people are still using, and then you've got the future, which is where we're going to go, but we don't know quite now how to get there.
And the question then becomes, how much do you really want those things to be sort of like hand and glove, or how much do you want them to be separate?
This would be a really good discussion to have for another 20 minutes, but we are out of time.
Thanks,
Will. That's it. We're off.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, all. Thank you.